What is up, guys? Stream number 2 of the day. Steve, what is this nonsense in the chat about Lou Williams? I didn't play NBA today, so I was wondering what happened. Anyways, I'm curious about that. But anyways, thanks for being here, guys. Week 16, only a couple more weeks until preseason. That's when the fun really begins. But definitely wanted to jump on and get a Thursday stream out for you guys. Typically, we do this in halftime of Thursday Night Football, but no Thursday game for Week 16. Definitely a ton to talk about. It's a really interesting slate. We're kind of getting to that part of the season where we really have to try and kind of monitor things as far as which teams are motivated. There's a ton of injuries for sure. So these are the kind of slates that I think Sunday morning is super important. So if you haven't been already, definitely continue to check out the streams that we have on Sunday morning. Per usual, I'll go on at 9. And Peter Jennings, aka CSU Ram 88, will join me as well. And then right after me, Manny goes on, Manny Laura at around 10:15ish or so, and then Ryan Hodge, and then Al Smizzle right up until lock. So that's kind of the gauntlet of streams that we have going on Sunday. We've been doing it for quite a few weeks now. It's been really great. Just in general, if you guys missed the NHL stream earlier today, we did get an answer on partner. So we hit all the goals that you have to hit for Twitch partner, and apparently they want to see a little more from the streams as far as viewer count throughout the week. Obviously, our Sunday streams have been hitting 300-400 people. Really want to try and get the average up to about 75 or so during the week. So anyone that's normally here for just NFL, if you want to just pop in throughout the week, that'd be super helpful. Speaking of super helpful, Null fan coming in hot. Thanks, man. How many subs is that? 20 subs? Jesus, man. Null fan. If there's one guy that's really gone out of his way to support what I'm trying to do here, it's got to be Null fan. Man, I appreciate it so much, bro. If anyone was just gifted a sub by Null fan, on my list is to figure out how to turn the sound down for these, by the way. I'll make sure I do that by Sunday morning. But if you just got gifted a sub by Noel Fan, definitely let him know in the chat. Say thank you. He's done a big part in helping build this community. So appreciate it, man. And then anyone that's normally just here for the NFL streams, definitely would love to see you guys come out during the week. If you aren't into some of the other sports, we have tons of people that aren't really NHL fans or NBA fans, but we're grinding a ton of different sports, a lot of niche stuff in the Discord. That's where a lot of the conversation happens when we're off stream. So I would definitely say come check out the Discord if you haven't already. If you're a Twitch sub, if you just got gifted a Twitch sub, you already have access to all the premium channels and all the conversation in there. So make sure you're taking advantage of that. But as far as news and notes, guys, I think that's pretty much it. I did do the Fantasy Pros podcast with Mike Tagliere this morning. That should drop tomorrow morning. But really interesting slate. Always fun to kind of get Mike's thoughts on things like that. We used to do a show together. He's really blown up. He's got an insane following. Actually was on Twitch a couple of years ago before Twitch really took off. But Mike's the best. So if you guys aren't familiar with the Fantasy Pros podcast, it's actually one of the bigger football and DFS podcasts there is now. It's really awesome to see good things happen to good people. So love Mike. Definitely check out that show I did with him. And then it's to be determined at this point, but we might have a show with Sports Geek as well on Saturday. It's going to kind of depend on family and a bunch of people traveling in for the holidays as well. A lot of trips to and from the airport for myself the next couple of days. But everyone that's here, hopefully we can keep things rolling through the holiday season. A lot of awesome games coming up just in general. But if you've been getting in on the Yahoo action, I will definitely be partaking in that again this week. Any type of contest like that with negative rake is really something that's hard to justify not playing. So do not speak to me. How do I give 6-month subs? I can never tell if you're trolling, man. Anyways, let me scroll down through the mountain of subs that Noel fan threw in the chat. In between those, Steve Boyton said his buddy works for the Mavs, texting me that I heard through the grapevine that Lou Will was going to play. Insane. Was he like min price or something, man? Love that, man. Hey, if you want the scoop from people that have connections like Steve, you're missing out on the Discord. Justin Fan as well. Always got to shout out Justin. When we're talking about NBA, we've been really fortunate to have Justin hang out with us a bit in the Discord as well. So love kind of getting his take for sure. Obviously kind of the brains behind the NBA projections over at Fantasy Lab. So Justin's the man. Running so bad that I faded the sub gifts. Man, if you've been around for any of the Sunday morning streams, it's been crazy the amount of sub gifts that have come through. So actually had a goal that I started today. I wanted to hit 125 subs through the Thursday stream and the Sunday morning stream. And that's pretty close to what our average has been. So these Thursday night streams, we've usually hit about, I don't know, 30 or so subs. And then on Sunday mornings, it's been all the way up to, I think Noel Fan came in and probably skewed that average, but we've gotten pretty close to 100 subs on Sunday mornings, which is just insane. So a couple weeks before the resub contest, which we'll talk about, but we always do a subscriber only contest on Sunday mornings as well. So it was a lot of fun to kind of do that this week. I actually gave away 3 free one-on-one coaching sessions, and then we also let one of the top 3 finishers come on to the Tuesday review show and actually go through his team. So it was awesome to have Riley on for that. Not sure if Riley's in the chat, but shout out Riley. Yeah, just kind of getting to know all these people that have been here since the beginning has been awesome. But join the community if you haven't already. That would be the main thing I would take from this long intro. The reason this is long is because we actually have a little bit more time today. We're normally kind of scrambling on Thursday to make sure we get everything out in between halftime. People are watching the game. People want to get back to the second half. But now we got tons of time. But that said, let's jump into it and let's just kind of start at the quarterback position, and we'll move to one of the main data sheets that we have here. So this is a sheet that I do make available to Twitch subscribers, and the way that you get that is you subscribe to the channel, obviously, but then if you get in the Discord, you actually link your Discord up to Twitch, and then as soon as you do that, the next sync, you will have all the premium channels available, and then I pin this in the subscriber only chat. So it's great to kind of have at least something in front of you while you're building lineups. Like, I understand the thought process behind like having articles open, having like a bunch of different chats, a bunch of different streams open. Like, that stuff's all great. But I do think that just actually kind of getting some of the noise out of your brain on a Sunday morning is something that I definitely prioritize myself. And a lot of these articles that are coming out super early in the week, I actually think by the time Sunday comes around, they end up hurting you in some ways if you're really relying on that to build lineups. So what I do is I build this sheet that has a lot of very core stats at each position, but also really focuses on game environment and pace. And honestly, I think that that's a lot more important than just looking at matchups. So I really focus on that personally, and I like to provide the subscribers with this research. It takes me a lot of time to put this together every week, so I just want to kind of give back and provide value to you guys. So that said, on this slate, there's a lot that kind of stood out to me at the quarterback position. So the first thing that I always wanted to start on is which team or which quarterback has the best matchup at the line of scrimmage. And for me this week, it's Andrew Luck against the New York Giants. So we know how well that this Indy defense or this Indy offensive line has played this year. But a big portion of why this rating is number 1 on the slate is a lot to do with how much the Giants just haven't been able to pressure. I missed out on the Giants game as far as the defense side of things earlier in the week, a couple weeks ago, and it's mostly because those guys just don't pressure. Oh my God, Noel Fan. He's gonna hit the sub goal on his own. 30 tier 1 subs. So he's just going to take out a third of the goal for the week in the first 10 minutes of the stream. Thanks, man. Appreciate it. Who was saying that they were running bad on subs? Fudged about it. Let's see if he got one. I bet he did. I would imagine. Is he still running bad on the free subs? Let's see. Look, oh, Matt LaMarca with the free sub. Love that. Shout out Matt LaMarca. Crazy, man. Thanks. If anyone knows a great way to turn down the volume for the notifications, let me know in the chat. I'll definitely turn those down. Ryan Kelly coming back last week was huge for the Colts. Yeah, totally agree with that, man. Like, I still think that, like, looking at how this team has wanted to play, like, I still think that they technically want to run the ball a little bit more. It's just they haven't really been able to do so lately. So we'll talk about some of the plays in the Indy game, but definitely, you don't hear the notifications, Doozy? I'm all frazzled now, Noel fan. You're nuts, bro. Appreciate it. Kazam, what's up, man? Thanks for being with us. Yeah, all right. So let's get back to some Andrew Luck talk, and I'll pretend this notification isn't going off in my ear constantly. I'm glad you guys can't hear it. Perfect. So yeah, at 6,200, I think that he's a really solid play. I mean, relative to if we take last week out of things, like what he's been able to do this year is super impressive, in my opinion. I think that he's one of the guys that definitely has a really strong floor, does have at least a little bit of rushing equity, not as much as a couple of the other guys that we'll talk about today. But this type of game environment, they shape up as the 5th most plays, game plays 3rd most. So both these teams playing at a decently high pace. The line of scrimmage really matters to me in particular. So Andrew Luck, I think he's one of my number 1 options right now if I was to look past a couple of these other guys that I do really like for rushing upside. So pretty massive home favorite for him. Would be shocked if he wasn't one of the highest owned guys on the slate. So they have been passing a lot, 9th most offensive pass percentage plays over the past 3 weeks. That's definitely something I'm paying attention to. And then this Giants team, they don't really have a ton of incentive really to play hard, to be completely honest. It's kind of making me a little bit nervous with some of their skill position players, which we'll talk about when we get to running back. But I think it's pretty much a smash spot for this Indy team in a game situation, game environment that I think is really favorable for scoring. Not afraid of Mac Day, especially if OBJ is out. I love Mac, man. He's one of the plays that I'm kind of locked in right now. I'm really trying to figure out with Mac. Well, now we're talking about this game. Let's just move over and talk about Mac too, because I think that that's a pretty big decision on this game in particular. So if we're just looking at Mac, 5,500, this guy's probably going to touch the ball 20 times. I'd be shocked if he touched it any fewer than that. My issue with Mac is he's just not used in the passing game anywhere near some of these other guys that are priced in his range for the most part. So at 5,500, you definitely get a ton of savings there, but the opportunity cost at the position is something that I'm a little bit nervous about. Like 3 straight games with just 1 target. Like he needs a game for him to completely smash, or at least if you're fading him, for him to completely bury you. He has to have one of those games like he had last week, 27 rush attempts, 139 yards, 2 touchdowns. So he's got to hit the bonus. If he doesn't hit the bonus, you're basically drawing dead. If you played Mac, and I'm not just saying you're drawing dead because I mean he definitely opens up a ton of roster construction, and that's one of the big kind of question marks, I guess, on this slate is how do you feel about the value at wide receiver, which we'll definitely get to. But I think giving up that slot for a guy that you know isn't going to catch a ton of balls is something that personally I'm not really on, but I do think that he's a pretty interesting tournament play for sure. Chad's on his way too. Nice, man. Noel fan and Chad, these guys are really doing it for me. I appreciate it, guys. I enjoy your Patreon, signed up and killing it on DK with single games. Patreon. Who's got a Patreon? Davis's Patreon, because Davis was we had a show with Davis Maddock last week that was a lot of fun. That's probably the Patreon you've been on. He's doing a lot of the showdown stuff as well. Really sharp dude. Smart business guy as well. Getting red zone too. Yeah, I'm with you, man. I mean, he's at his price, like, and his touch volume, he's definitely in play. I'm just trying to figure out if he makes sense from a ceiling perspective without kind of the passing usage for sure. Is there enough left for Luck? I mean, absolutely. I think that, like, anytime we have them on the fast track, like, love T.Y. Hilton. If we're just going to continue to talk about this game, we might as well talk about T.Y. Hilton. This guy at 7,100, they just don't want to price him up really any higher than that. He's seeing very similar volume numbers to guys like DeAndre Hopkins, Michael Thomas, Devontae Adams. The game environment is just better, in my opinion. I get it. He's going to probably face off against Janoris Jenkins. I mean, I'm not really too worried about that, to be completely honest. Tied for the 2nd highest weighted opportunity rating on the entire slate at just 7,100. If there's a guy that I'm going to reach for, if I'm trying to correlate luck with someone, I think that it's interesting trying to at least get to T.Y. Hilton in one of your wide receiver slots in this game. And then if you're trying to bring it back with someone on the Giants, like you said, if there's no OBJ, you kind of have to make that decision. Hey, Steve with the gifted sub to Embiid. Appreciate it, man. Wow. A lot of gifted subs. Appreciate it, man. Thanks for being back with us again, Steve. Yeah, so the idea, so basically if you are going to kind of go heavy on luck, if you get TY in, if you get Mac in, bringing it back with Saquon is at least interesting to me. The thing that stood out to me the most about Saquon is 7,900. This guy's price has dropped so much. And I mean, it makes a decent amount of sense. Like against Indy, it's not the best matchup on the ground. But I mean, still from a game environment perspective, someone that does have a real ceiling in the passing game, which we know, I think that Saquon is very much in play at 7,900. Still obviously prefer Zeke. Don't need to spend a ton of time on that, but we'll talk about that game shortly. Maybe we'll go game by game today, since that's basically what we've done so far. But yeah, I definitely think that if you're trying to bring it back with someone, Saquon is my preferred weapon. I do think that going to a guy like Evan Ingram is actually super interesting as well. If we're just looking purely at tight ends, he's in a range that still makes me a little bit uncomfortable. So 4,600, typically at the tight end position, I'm trying to either pay all the way up for one of these elite usage guys like Zach Ertz, George Kittle, Eric Ebron. You can put him even into that mix after his game last week. I still believe in what his kind of role is going to be for Indy. So if you really kind of stack up this Indy game and you don't play Ebron, bringing it back with Evan Ingram makes a ton of sense. Like he's a guy that's been a great I mean, he's a very talented pass catching tight end, and you can't really say that about I mean, really a ton of guys. So I think that he's for sure interesting, even though I think he's a little bit more expensive than I would like to see. A guy like Sterling Shepard, someone that we've gone to with like not a ton of success over the last couple of weeks. Definitely don't think his ceiling is super high, but he has performed relatively well without OBJ in the past if we take out these last couple games. So I think this game's really interesting. I mean, if we're just looking at game flow, which I do think is one of the most important things, like this has the potential to be one of the highest paced games on the entire slate with pretty decent matchups at the line of scrimmage on both sides. So I think that it's super interesting. If we just want to look, I mean, might as well go over to the Vegas page now and kind of touch on this. So they do have a decently high total, but it is outside the top tier. So I'm trying to get a feel for what the ownership's going to be like. I mean, tied for third on the slate, still probably going to be relatively high owned, especially with some of the weapons and all the traction that Luck has been getting for good reason, honestly. Anyone miss out on a sub that wants one, DM me. I'm not pissy, man. I'm not pissy at all, that's for sure. Got to crush an NBA last night to give more than a few subs away. Hey, man, just appreciate you being here, Steve. We'll get that back in NBA. Don't you worry, man. We just got to get you in a little bit more NHL. That's where all the action's been lately. All right, so that's the first game I definitely wanted to touch on. The next game that I think is super interesting, we'll just kind of work our way up here a little bit. It's this Tampa Bay and Dallas game. So let's kind of go back here and take a closer look at that. So one of the interesting ones, I think, if we're just looking at some quarterbacks that at least have some rushing equity, I definitely think that Dak is still right there. So I do have some issues with this. I've heard a lot of people talk about Dak this week as in a potential kind of bounce back spot after some people were on him last week. I actually don't love kind of what I'm seeing as far as the pace and place side of things at the line of scrimmage. Not the best matchup in the world. It could be worse for sure. Tampa Bay does like to kind of get the pace up a little bit. Tampa Bay kind of middle of the pack, but this Dallas defense has been really solid. I do have some concerns with this game for sure. It's obviously very stackable. Like Ezekiel Elliott, don't really have to say a lot about the guy, right? I mean, his role has been absolutely insane. 29 touches is probably a pretty conservative, I mean, realistic, I guess is a better word for it, touch projection for this guy at 9K. We talk about it a lot, but probably should be priced well over 10K relative to basically jamming in wide receiver 1, wide receiver 2 type volume through the air and then adding in a ton of usage on the ground and a massive red zone role. So like Zeke he's basically, I mean, he hasn't killed you the last 2 weeks, and he still hasn't gotten in the end zone over the last 2 weeks. So like his ceiling is still sky high in my opinion. I think Dallas like really wants to try and make a push here. So 18 touches on the ground last week, 7 receptions on 8 targets, 13 targets the week before. So there's really not a whole lot to say. Like I think that Zeke has got to be a cornerstone of your cash games for sure. But if you want to take that game a step further, I have a little bit more concern, I think, with Dak than some other people. Wasn't the best matchup last week. I think that was a good kind of decision to get off him late. I was on him kind of earlier in the week, but moved off with some offensive line issues on both sides of the ball last week. Michael Gallup, still a guy that's kind of popping in like the target share, market share of air yards type things. Put up the goose egg last week, but at 3,500, I actually don't mind the idea of going back to him as a cheap wide receiver. At least we know when he is being used, he's seeing some deeper targets. So I think anytime someone's coming, I mean, he wasn't massively popular last week or anything like that, but I do think that going back to a guy that at least carried ownership in tournaments and got a goose egg last week, definitely think that he's in play if you really want to stack up this game. My main issue, Amari Cooper is too expensive for me. I get it. If he goes off and burns me, that's fine at 7,500. I just much prefer TY in that range. Probably even prefer a guy like kind of Michael Thomas for a little bit more expensive, obviously. So, Steve, I thought you were done gifting subs, man. Thanks, bro. Elliott gets 20 points with 4 turnovers in the worst spot. Yeah, exactly. Like his floor is so safe, man. It's crazy. I just think that this is like similarly though when we were talking about Gurley early in the season, like this is a situation we look back on in the off season or even next year. And we just realize how truly unique the way he's being used is. So I definitely think that he's a guy I'm going to try and build around, which makes me not like some of these pass catchers as much. Amari at 7,500. Sure, in tournaments, if you want to do it, roll him into some game stacks. Just not really a play for me myself. If anyone isn't around for the Tuesday streams, primarily I'm playing some of these smaller field tournaments at the mid to high stakes. So I review the 1,500 on DraftKings every week. Only 72 people in that field size. So I'm not really super interested in reaching for some of these expensive wide receivers when I have so much running back equity that I'm going to try and jam in a small field. Another thing about that, they actually don't have my tournament this week, which is kind of annoying. They don't have the 1,500 on the main slate. They have a $3,500 entry or something like that in the 3K range, which I consider playing, but the structure on it isn't that great, and it's a lot smaller field size. So it's going to be a later call on that. I'm either going to play the 3K, just eat the more exposure, obviously, more bankroll exposure, I mean, or I'm going to go down to the 777, and the 777 is actually a 2 max. So I have a pretty, if anyone was around for any of the FanDuel shows I did earlier in the year, a couple of those 2 max tournaments over there, I have a pretty, I don't know if it's unique, but a pretty distinct strategy that I like to do for 2 max in a small field. So I'm actually leaning more towards playing 2 entries in the 777, but we'll have to talk about, or at least think about that one a little bit more. All right, so that's kind of where I'm at on the Dallas game. If I'm bringing it back with anyone on Tampa Bay, it's really tough for me to get super excited about any of the pass catchers, really. I think if I was to go back to someone, I think going back to Godwin makes a good amount of sense as well. Again, like a guy that has underperformed 2 weeks in a row, that's still seeing a decent amount of target share in 2 really tough matchups, by the way. So he saw 10 targets, which obviously wasn't great, but last week had Baltimore in kind of a rainy game as well. Didn't really work out for him, but I do think he's a talented guy who's definitely going to continue to be involved. So yeah, if I was rolling it back with one guy, that's kind of the issue, right? Like who do you roll it back with on Tampa Bay? And for me, it's probably Godwin, but I don't love him, that's for sure. Just a couple shout outs to Kazam the man with the follow, Quadfather85 with the follow. Welcome to the community, guys. It's been crazy to see how many subs have come through on this stream. Jesus, Null fan. And Steve. Keep getting me sidetracked, man. All right, so let's go back and check out what other games we have available. So I guess we should probably talk about this Green Bay and New York Jets game. I know someone was messing around, or at least talking about it in the chat. People want me to play the 1500 main event. Man, that's a big tournament. So obviously that would be great to take that thing down, but that's like way outside of what my strategy is for those small fields. So how many people are in that? I'm going to check right now, actually. 3,700 people in that. See, my problem with it is like there's 111. You can put 111 lineups in this thing. So like just putting in a single bullet to a field size of 3,703. Yeah, I get it. There's a million up top, but my strategy is probably not going to win me that tournament, basically. So I'd rather stick to the small field stuff. Not seeing a lot of this SF game is about to put me back in the tank. Need your Robbie Anderson take. Okay, yeah, so let's... Noel Fan with the 5,000 bits. Thanks, man. Jesus. Noel Fan was telling me, I think before the stream on Sundays, like, what do I have to do to get people to unload their wallets? And I was like, man, I really don't care about that. We're just trying to grow this community right now. But I do appreciate it, man. That's crazy. Maisie, bits are basically like, they're basically like tips, right? So Twitch is a little bit different than like YouTube, which we used to stream on. And it just gives you the ability to kind of monetize in a bunch of different ways with subscriptions, with these bits. So every bit, I believe, is 1 cent. I could be wrong on that, but you purchase them right from Twitch. And then, yeah, they kind of, they go into this little jar, as you can see above my head. And yeah, it's just basically like a tip. Hey, what's up, Allie? All right, so yeah, let's talk about Robbie Anderson a little bit. I do actually have a lot to say about this. So let's go back to the spreadsheet quickly. So I understand Robbie Anderson at 4,500. He's clearly Darnold's favorite target since he has been back. I have a lot of concerns about this, and it's for a lot of the same reasons that I had concerns about Kenny Stills last week. I actually really like the Green Bay defense because I think they're going to be able to get a ton of pressure. If we just look back at the quarterback page and sort by the worst offensive line matchups and look at the bottom, it's one of the worst matchups at the line of scrimmage. So almost like 5th worst matchup, basically, because of how the Jets offensive line is playing, and the Green Bay defensive line pressures a ton. So going back to a guy like Robbie Anderson, one of the higher ADOTs on the entire slate. If we're just looking at ADOTs, he's one of the guys that sees a lot of deep targets. So where I went wrong last week on some of the decisions that I made was trying to jam in Stills, but at the same time, it was the same kind of thing at the line of scrimmage. I really thought that Minnesota had a chance to get to Tannehill and really pressure. And if that happens, there's just not enough time for a guy like Stills to get downfield. So if Robbie Anderson's going to be really, really owned at 4,500, I think that makes a decent tournament fade, or at least a decent fade in general, just because if there's a chance that Green Bay really does kind of cause havoc for the Jets, that I think that there's an even better chance that Robbie Anderson doesn't get completely downfield. And that's where a lot of his equity is coming from. I think that's where a lot of the hype's coming from, honestly. So Null Fan just pod about 3% of your main event entry. Man, you guys really want me to play the main event? God. It's a big field size, man. It would suck to bubble that and then basically do well in this smaller contest, but I will think about it. I'm concerned with how much interest I have in Anderson and McGuire. Yeah, so McGuire is not really for me. So I understand like the savings that you get from a guy at 4,700 that's going to touch the ball a ton. It all makes a ton of sense from that perspective. I just still think that the opportunity cost at running back isn't worth it for me. It probably sounds like a broken record, but I just prefer the floor and the ceiling from these elite usage backs. And these elite usage backs that are extremely heavily used in the passing game, it's unique to anything else in this entire game that we're playing. So, I think Elijah McGuire is definitely going to draw some ownership based on how much he's going to touch the ball at 4,700. Again, it's not something that I'm totally locked in. I've heard some people talk about it. I haven't really listened to any podcasts or done a ton of that yet, just basically going off my own research. And I definitely think that there's some concerns for sure. Chad coming in hot with the 5 tier 1 subs. Appreciate it, Chad. Chad has been absolutely so CB counts in the chat has been absolutely killing it this year, killing in Showdown, killing it in golf, killing it in a bunch of different niche stuff that him and NoFan are playing. So thanks for coming in the stream and gifting some subs, man. Appreciate it. Yeah, and just read what you said, NoFan, in the chat. Appreciate it, man. And you don't suck at NFL, by the way. Really appreciate it. It's been fun working with you guys, man. So I'm glad that you've had some success. You've put in the work, that's for sure. So need those FanDuel Showdown tips. Yeah, you guys gotta link up on that. Those Chad and NoFan, if you're interested in Showdown, like those are the guys that I'd be picking their brains on. We might have to have one or both of them on a stream at some point before playoffs to kind of talk through some stuff. All right. I did suck at NFL pre-Holka. Thanks, dude. You need to give yourself a little bit more credit, though. Who are we talking about? Oh, we're talking about the Jets. So the other side of this game, I actually am somewhat interested in Aaron Rodgers. He's a guy that I haven't really played a lot of this year at all. But if we're just looking at some of the things that I really value, third best matchup at the line of scrimmage. They've been a very pass-happy team over the last 3 weeks, second most pass-happy team in the league, second most plays. Like, the gameplay is set up really well. Like, I actually think that Aaron Rodgers is super interesting, especially if he's going to be not as highly owned as a guy like Andrew Luck or some of the other quarterbacks that at least are gaining some traction as the week goes on. Like, so Deshaun Watson's at 6,600, who we'll talk about, but at 6,300, I do think that Rodgers is at least interesting. So he is probable at this moment, so definitely keep an eye on that. He did practice in full again on Thursday, so today. So yeah, I'm interested in that. I do really like the weapons so Rodgers is a really good kind of thing to talk about, because if we don't have Randall Cobb in this game, which I believe has already been confirmed, there's some cheap options that we can potentially go to at the wide receiver position. And then Devontae Adams, obviously, if you want to grab that type of higher end wide receiver equity, definitely think he makes sense. I think people are going to play Jamal Williams at 5,400 as well in this game. Again, another guy that's basically a net zero in the passing game for the most part. But Rodgers to like one of these cheap wide receivers, I'm actually kind of intrigued by that. So someone like MVS, Mark Valdez-Scantling, I'm really trying to get a feel for that. Like that's my biggest kind of project, I guess, as the week progresses here, is if there's a cheap Green Bay wide receiver, I think that's a really interesting guy to pair with Aaron Rodgers, just because I think it's a really good spot, especially if everyone is going to be on Andrew Luck in that range. It's something that I'm interested in, even on the road. So that's where I'm at on that game in particular. So then the game everyone wants to talk about is this Steelers and Saints game. So it kind of goes back to a lot of the things from some of the other games that we've talked about. If we're just really trying to focus on pace and focus on the line of scrimmage, it's pretty average from that perspective. I definitely think there's going to be some points scored. But if we're looking at the higher price quarterbacks, obviously take Mahomes out of it. Obviously this KC Seattle game is the night game, but I did leave it on here because I know a lot of people are going to be firing at that YouTube. Been a long week, guys. At that Yahoo tournament with the reverse rake. So left the KC guys in here. But if we're just looking at the more expensive quarterbacks, Ben at 6,700, Breeze at 65. Definitely think that Ben is interesting. I get it. He's on the road, but it is a Superdome. So hopefully we get a little bit more offense than we normally would get from Ben on the road. My issue is like always the same. New Orleans does play a decent amount of ball control. There's never going to be a ton of plays in these New Orleans games. So I do have some concerns there at the line of scrimmage. I am a little bit, I guess, a little bit below neutral on what's going to happen with that. Pittsburgh's a team that pressures really well. New Orleans' offensive line has been really strong. Same thing. So both defenses pressure well, but both offensive lines have been pretty good. So probably a little below average there, but not enough to really change your opinion on these guys. My biggest issue with stacking these games up in general is it's just so expensive. So trying to get to Breeze, Kamara, or Thomas, like those type of stacks, you bring it back with someone on Pittsburgh. Yeah, it totally depends on what happens with these wide receivers. Obviously, trying to get to someone like Antonio Brown at 8,300, like based on his target share, it's just really tough for me to pull the trigger on a guy like that when we have these running backs in a similar price range. So that's pretty much always my biggest concern, I guess. But yeah, again, guys, as we're going through this, feel free to tell me what you guys think about some of these situations at all as well. It's a Thursday. There's still lot to kind of uncover as we kind of progress through here. An anonymous gifter, that's never happened before with the tier 1 sub. But so whoever gifted that, appreciate it. Looks like MGS Slush Fund with the free sub. Awesome. Saints D has been playing really well lately. I'm with you, Fudged. I think that's like a big issue. So Cobb could be out. MBS played the slot when he was out. Yeah, so that's the guy that I had on my list right now. So MBS, if we're just looking at his price, 3,700. Pair him with Rodgers. Like I'm interested in that for sure. Yeah, so I think that game's interesting, but like this New Orleans game is one that you probably have to get right. I'm just like really trying to figure out which direction I'd want to go. Jalen Samuels missed out on that last week. I guess I have a hard time paying 6,700 for a guy that at least we couldn't realistically project for a ton of usage on the ground. Like I get it, he had his first 100-yard game last week. And it totally depends on what happens with kind of Connor and the rest of this backfield. So I don't know. It's a tougher game to figure out. I think this is one that we're going to have to kind of work through on news for sure. If we're just looking for the highest upside plays, like it's still like the same guys that you would normally think in this game. It's Michael Thomas. It's Alvin Kamara. Juju, I mean, he's questionable, so that's something that we have to monitor as well. He had a groin injury, I believe, in practice today. So, I mean, we're going to have to keep an eye on that. That's never an injury that bodes well for production. Never, I mean, I'm not paying 8K for a guy that has a chance to jump out of the game with that type of injury. Mark Ingram is someone that's been popping in at least my models, just based on the game flow situation, which we could see in this. Makes a decent amount of sense if you think that New Orleans is going to play really well, but I don't see like a lot of like standouts from this game. I guess like Kamara, like he's always a guy that can break a big play for sure, but you never really know. I mean, 7,400, he's still priced kind of close to where when he was seeing like the elite usage before Ingram came back. So if we're just looking at his touch share, only 14 attempts last week, but he had 9 targets. So with that kind of involvement in the passing game, Kamara's still in play for sure. I mean, he's probably my favorite play in this game. It's a tough one to figure out for sure. Nolfan and Steve both with the 100 bits going bit for bit with each other. Awesome. All right, man. Appreciate you, Noel. Good luck on NBA Showdown, bro. Yeah, go make back all these subs that you just bought me, bro. You too, Chad. All right. Yeah, I'll talk with you guys tomorrow for sure. So those are the main games that I've been kind of at least going through at this point of the week. I think that those are the ones that stand out the most. Definitely the ones that I think that are going to be the most popular. So one of the games that I think that I'm actually really interested in is this Philadelphia and Houston game. So that's the one I want to kind of talk about next. So if we really want to pay down at quarterback, it's really tough to kind of get away from a guy like Nick Foles. 4,700, that price tag is just so nice. If we're just looking at a situation where the defense is a lot better against the run than against the pass, we call that a pass funnel. It's a great spot against Houston, who's been really good against the run, very poor against the pass. So I am a little bit nervous at the line of scrimmage. Like Houston pressures well. Philly has been up and down as far as the way they've protected this year. I do think Foles is more mobile than people get him credit for, but you can't really give him that solid of a rushing floor, really. But at 4,700, I think he's at least interesting for sure in this game where I think there's going to be some points scored. Yeah, so I love seeing a tight spread too, just because, I mean, it kind of plays to the fact that maybe this game goes back and forth a little bit. It's basically both sides of the salary spectrum, like Foles at 4,700, and then if we're looking all the way up at Deshaun Watson at 6,600. Watson's a guy that I definitely struggle with at that price. I actually think the Philly defense is very much in play. Again, the one thing that about Watson is he's kind of defied the odds as far as this line of scrimmage stuff, because he's actually been really strong under pressure this year, and we know he has elite mobility. So if we're just looking purely at rushing yards, he's right behind a guy like Josh Allen, who's basically breaking all the kind of quarterback rushing expectations for all of these positions. So Deshaun Watson at 6,600, when we have Brady, we have Luck right there, on the road, slight dog, like not a great game environment. Like I struggle with Deshaun. I think I like him a lot more if we get some more clarity about their running situation. It looks like Lamar Miller is trending towards, I believe, not playing. Well, let's double check that quickly. He's questionable, so he was limited again in practice today, but at least he got a limited practice in. So that's definitely solid. I'm always kind of a little bit nervous about this Houston team and pass attempts, particularly for a guy I'm paying 6,600 for. Alshon popping on FanDuel. Yeah, I've heard a couple people talk about Alshon for sure. Not typically a play that I make. Like, so he's in the mid range, but I think he's somewhat interesting just because we know how much that Foles has really peppered him with targets historically. So 5,300. I mentioned a massive pass funnel. If you're trying to pair him, it makes some sense for sure. I'm trying to get a feel for if Alshon's going to be super chalky. That's probably more of a fade for me, but I want to see his price on FanDuel quick. Yeah, 6,300 on FanDuel. That's really solid. So, I mean, I think he shapes up better for a guy that you're really hoping for to kind of hit pay dirt on a touchdown heavy site. So Foles over on FanDuel is 6K. Yeah, I think the stack Foles to Jeffrey makes a lot more sense on FanDuel for sure. Next Tuesday, what percent will Foles Jeffrey stack be owned? Yeah, so we'll check that out obviously on the review stream. I'm trying to think. I bet so the actual stack, it's always lower than you think. On DraftKings, like if Foles ends up being, let's put Foles even at like conservative. Let's say Foles is 15% in the Millie Maker, and then we have Alshon and 10%. Like I bet the combination is like 3-4% owned. It'll be much lower owned than people think. But I do think people are kind of warming up to this game. Still trying to piece together how I want to do it myself. I've heard a lot about how bad the Eagles are against mobile quarterbacks. Yeah, so the Eagles, they play a decent amount of man coverage, right? And that's always what I want to see for a mobile quarterback. Like same thing for even, we'll talk about Josh Allen a little bit. So if we're targeting a running quarterback, I want primarily a defense that plays in man coverage, because that means that their eyes are not on the line of scrimmage like in his zone coverage scheme. So that's part of the reason that I didn't want to play Josh Allen last week against Detroit. Outside of the fact that Detroit really tries to slow the pace down, they also play a ton of zones. So they're really good at limiting rushing upside from these quarterbacks. I'm with you. Like, so if we think that Deshaun Watson is going to see even more touches on the ground than usual because of the way this team plays defense, definitely think that helps inflate his floor a decent chunk. Like if we're projecting him for around 30 rushing yards, like that's something that's worth a ton for sure. Friend who went to ODU says this Hinkie guy slings it. Is that true? I think he's got a decent amount of like speed behind him too. So 4K, man, that's really scary. At home against Atlanta, in kind of the small sample, he does have a really high yards per attempt. So yeah, I buy it. I mean, if at 4K, I think that depends on what you think about McCaffrey too. So let's circle back to that and finish up this Houston-Philly game quickly. So I do think that Zach Ertz still very much in play at 5,900. Again, Zach Ertz at 5,900. If he's a wide receiver, he's easily closing in on 7K based on his target share. So I think that he's awesome. I think he's an awesome play if you pay all the way up. At tight end, I'm always trying to either pay all the way up or pay all the way down. And Ertz is one of the guys that I'm strongly considering if I end up doing that. On the Houston side of the ball, DeAndre Hopkins at the top. If we're just looking at weighted opportunity rating, market share of air yards, basically anything that really quantifies target share, quantifies volume, like DeAndre Hopkins is going to be towards the top of that in probably the top three. So yeah, in game stack situations, getting Watson, getting DeAndre Hopkins, it's one of those kind of volume situations that definitely makes a good amount of sense. It's just really hard to get up to a guy at 8,600 when you can basically get a guy like McCaffrey for 200 more. Yeah, it's really tough from that perspective for sure. Texans are terrible against tight ends. Let's see. Yep, 29th in DVOA against the tight end position. Again, massive pass funnel. Really strong strong spot for Ertz. So I wouldn't be surprised if I kind of fell in love with some of these like really cheap wide receivers, like maybe the Green Bay guys, and like really tried to make a conservative effort on Sunday morning to get up to a guy like Ertz at 5,900 in this matchup, and pretty good game environment. So I'm with you there, man. Cockroach 24. I'm obligated to play him. I've been following his career for a long time. Yeah, what's his mobility like? That's what I want to hear about. What his rushing upside is going to be like. I think that's my main kind of decision on that. But 4K like opens up a ton in your roster for sure. It allows you to get up to obviously the running backs, but even increase your wide receiver volume a little bit too. So I think it's interesting. Zeke or Saquon? Man, it's really hard for me to get away from Zeke at this point. Even how he's kind of run bad with touchdowns the last couple of weeks, his role is just insane. I will say about Saquon, like at some point, like I am a little bit nervous that they might scale back his usage a little bit. Like I don't have anything scientific to really back that up. But for a team that really has a lot of incentive not to win games, it would make sense to scale back one of their best players, someone they definitely need for the future as well. So Saquon at 7,900, the price makes it a lot tougher in my opinion. But I mean, in a vacuum, raw points, like I think that Zeke's definitely the play there. All right, let's see. What other games should we touch on before we get out of here? Normally we go position by position, but we kind of got off the rails a little bit since we have a little bit more time today than we normally do. I think those are the main games that I want to talk about, but let's touch on Patriots Bills since we do have news. Obviously, Josh Gordon, I believe, has something incoming, which will kind of come out later. But really, just sad to see him go. I'm sure he'll probably be ending his career in this way. I guess a guy that couldn't stay clean off the field. Tough situation for sure. From a fantasy perspective, trying to get a feel for if a guy like Julian Edelman's in play, Cordell Patterson, like who sees the bump for the Patriots. Like, is it Edelman with a few more targets? Is it Gronk? It's all stuff that we're going to have to work through, and we might not know, honestly. Like, I think that people have been kind of talking about James White, but like the way this game shapes up, like I don't think New England's going to be really trailing enough for that kind of to make a ton of sense to me. Like James White's price, let's see what he is at. So it's 5,200. Yeah, I mean, it's really tough to justify pass catching running back in a game where they're 12.5-point favorites or so. But I am somewhat interested in Josh Allen. Like, so if someone wants to talk me off this, that would be great because I haven't played Allen yet. I've missed out on a lot of that. Obviously, I'm only rolling out one main team every week, but Josh Allen at 5,800. Yeah, I mean, his price is still solid. Again, like New England is another team that plays a good amount of man coverage, so shapes up really well for the rushing upside again for this guy. So I think that the matchup is infinitely better this week than it was for him last week. So always interested in these guys. He's someone that I'll probably have a decent amount of exposure to over on Yahoo, and I love because that's where I'm going to be building all my tournament teams, obviously outside of my main team. These cheap wide receivers, McKenzie, Foster, like that's the kind of situation. So if I'm really going to go to one of these cheap quarterbacks, I want to have someone to pair him with that really, if that correlation hits, really leverages me on the rest of the field. So that's something that I'm considering with the Allen side of things. And then the Patriots side's always a little bit less clear for me. Getting up to Edelman at 7,200, I think that was a lot more viable on last week's slate just because we didn't have a ton of these really high-flying offenses to choose from. There was a little bit more of an expectation that it would be kind of a gross slate, really kind of take your points where you can. So I'm not as interested in Edelman at 7,200, and maybe that's bad since we lose a few targets, obviously, from Gordon. But yeah, it's interesting. Foster Australian for sex was too funny. Was that a tweet? Like I haven't listened to any of Levitan's pods this week. But I did hear the Foster's Australian for sex quote. That's funny. Bill's pass defense is real. And their pressure numbers are actually pretty solid too. So like if people want to play Brady at 5,900, I'm a little bit nervous about that, to be honest. Is a high team total. I get that. They are at home. So could be a game that kind of flies under the radar a little bit. Like if we're just looking at some of these games, like I'm always interested to see like what in this range could shape up really well for points. And that's definitely one that I'm thinking about. So let's just talk through a couple of the other plays on the slate that we haven't really touched on yet. So Todd Gurley, obviously it's a really strong spot against Arizona, a team that's given up some of the most rush attempts on the entire in the entire league. But Gurley's been banged up. He's got some knee swelling, I believe. So if they do scale him back, it's just really hard to Noel fan with the more subs. Thanks, bro. 10 more subs from Noel fan. Hopefully everyone came on the stream that needed a sub, because Noel fan's basically buying subs for the entire chat. Appreciate it, man. Yeah, so basically, like, can we pay up for Gurley with his price all the way at 9,200 when we have kind of some question marks basically about what his role is going to be? It's tough. I think you'll get him at lower ownership than you probably should in this matchup, but the safety is not the normal safety from Gurley for sure. At 9,200, it's harder to justify. I hope we get a little bit more clarity. Like maybe they're just resting him throughout the week to hopefully get him right going into some of the playoff weeks. Like let's hope that's what it is. But if the Rams totally smash the Cardinals, you would think that it would make sense for them to kind of scale Gurley back a little bit. And that's definitely not what you want from someone at 9,200. Of course, he's someone that could still have a really high efficiency game, score 3 touchdowns on whatever, 18, 20 touches, but not really something that I want to kind of bet on, I guess. Noel fan equals Santa. Yeah, he is a beast, that's for sure. Love Chubb this week. Yeah, so I've been saving Chubb. Let's talk about Chubb. Chubb's one of my favorite plays on the entire week. I love this Cleveland-Cincinnati game as one of those games that could be under the radar for points. I almost always love Cleveland because they really kind of ramp up the pace. So if we're looking at the most plays, Cleveland, the most plays as far as game, Cleveland and Cincinnati. We know about all the injuries for Cincinnati. Like Boyd's been playing so well. Now he's banged up. There's really just, obviously we don't have Andy Dalton anymore. It's crazy the injuries that these Bengals have seen. So there's really not a lot left outside of like Joe Mixon, John Ross, and a couple other wide receivers that are basically coming off the street. So on the other side of this game, Chubb, like 7,300, he's a guy that is definitely not a zero in the passing game against Cincinnati, 32nd in the league at defending running backs in the passing game. It's a really tough spot for me to get off of him for sure. It sounds crazy, but I think I actually prefer him over Saquon. So 7,300 versus 7,900. I think there's less question marks for Chubb's role for sure. Like they've made an effort to get him involved in the passing game a little bit more in just a smash spots. So a touchdown favorite at home, pretty decent total in a high-paced game in a great matchup. Yeah, I'm with you, man. Chubb's one of my favorite plays. And Noel fan has Chubb, so you know he's going to win all the money. Just tail Noel fan, and you're probably going to be rich enough to come in here and gift subs. He's pricey. Just been picking at the Cincinnati D for a while. No, dude, I would assume a lot of people are going to be on Chubb. I would think, just based on the spot that he's in, I think that's a really great call, man. I'm glad you brought him up. I don't think I would have forgot to talk about him, but it wasn't one of the games that jumped out, at least from a Vegas perspective, but it was one of those ones that I think sets up really well for plays and could fly under the radar in game stacks for sure. Duke, 40% of the snaps last week. I'm not super worried about Duke. I mean, he's definitely not a guy that I'm playing. 3,800. If you're really trying to leverage the Chubb people, I think it's fine, but I just don't play these running backs that get like 4 or 5 rushing attempts. There's arguably wide receivers that have this type of floor, and you don't have to waste a running back slot on them. So, yeah, I think that Chubb's the smash play in this game. If we really want to try and bring it back with someone on Cincy, I think that Uzoma is interesting at 3,300 if we're just looking at the tight end position. We really want to try and target guys that run a ton of routes. Second most routes on the slate over the past 4 games. Travis Kelce is the only one that has a higher routes run per game over that time period. And obviously Kelce is not on the DraftKings slate. So Uzoma is not seeing deep targets, very kind of close to the line of scrimmage targets. But at 3,300, I think he's my favorite cheap tight end for sure. I've also considered going all the way down to Chris Herndon, especially if people are all in on Robbie Anderson. Like, again, like, I don't know if he's going to be able to have time to get down the field. So hopefully these lower ADOT targets end up going to Chris Herndon at 3,100. I would love to get him at super low ownership if people are going to be really heavy on Robbie Anderson in the spot. So that's kind of what I'm looking at on tight end. Curly, Barkley, Zeke equals money. I wonder if it's even viable to to jam all 3 of those guys in. There's a decent amount of value, so it'll be unique for sure. And I never hate, like, if anyone's watched my streams over the past like half a season or even longer, like, if you jam in all the running backs, I will 100% review your lineup and I will 100% pump your tires. And Noel Fan knows all about that. Oh, yeah, let's talk about defense. I guess we haven't talked about them at all. Cordell Patterson is the key. I can't tell if you're trolling, man. I actually think that Patterson's in play, so I hope you're serious. All right, so let's look at defense. So I wish that Kansas City was on the slate because I would love to play them against Seattle. They've been pressuring a ton. Russell Wilson takes sacks. I will have a decent amount of KC exposure on the Yahoo slate for sure. Past that, I mentioned that I do really like I at least think that Philadelphia is interesting at 2,100. So it's not a great slate for paying all the way down. And one thing that I've kind of noticed over the past couple of weeks, like, we don't really have like that 4K defense anymore on DraftKings. At least, like, it's very narrow now. So like paying down to 2K when we can get someone like the Rams at 3,200, like, it's not that much of a difference. And like, it's weird how they mess with pricing in this way. Like similar to what they did at quarterback, where they kind of bunched up all the prices at quarterback. They're starting to do that at defense now. So I actually don't mind like trying to get up to some of these plays that I think are better. So like the Rams, for instance, like, massive favorite. They aren't at home, but hopefully we get some turnovers from Josh Rosen. Second best matchup at the line of scrimmage, first best on the DraftKings slate. So 3,200. I think that's a play that I think is interesting for sure. I mentioned Green Bay for all the reasons that I'm off Robbie Anderson and Darnold. I think that Green Bay is in play at 2,800. Yeah, again, like, I'm trying to even like find like a really like great home favorite play, and I mean, Philadelphia is technically a slight favorite. They're at home. Like, a lot of these teams at home, like, not great matchups at the line of scrimmage. So I still think I skew towards pressure in general. If we just want to target a lot of pass attempts, a lot of those situations too, it's like not a great matchup for the defense at the line of scrimmage. Like, the best one is arguably this Houston spot. So I think that Houston is definitely in play. So both defenses in this game, I think, are squarely in play. You can make a pretty solid argument for New England just based on their price against Buffalo. Obviously, Josh Allen will take sacks. He'll throw interceptions. Should be a decent amount of plays. I just don't love the pressure side of this from New England to really get excited about that play. But I think it's one that I think that'll be the one that people pay down for. Or maybe even Dallas against Tampa Bay, just because Dallas has kind of been trending in the right direction. We know that Winston's pretty mistake prone. So I actually think I prefer the Dallas play to the Patriots. But it's crazy. I wish like some of these like really heavy favorites were in good pressure spots. They're really not outside of the Rams, and the Rams aren't at home. So it's an interesting week at defense. I don't know if anything really stands out to me, but those are the ones that I'm kind of looking at. Jam in 3 running backs every week. Dual usage value makes Noel happy. Yeah, man. So what he means by dual usage is basically getting quarterbacks that also run, getting wide receivers that end up getting like some rush attempts here and there, like gadgety type plays. Like, they have a ton of value, but then mostly these running backs that have elite usage in the passing game. So dual usage, just different ways to get points, different ways to get points out of the salary that you're spending is super important. Or throw TDs. Yeah, I wish that was a little bit easier to project. All right, guys, we're going to kind of wrap things up a little bit here. That's pretty much how I feel about the slate here on a Thursday. This will be going up on on YouTube tomorrow. Be sure and check out the Fantasy Pros podcast as well. That should be going live tomorrow morning. I have a couple new YouTube videos that'll be going up, looking at a bunch of different research projects that I've kind of been trending towards putting content out for over the last couple of weeks. I've just gotten super busy, but using stuff from Sports Info Solutions, which has a ton of awesome pressure metrics that I've been really excited to kind of dive into. Excited to release that tomorrow. I'll be on the lookout for that. And then we'll see what happens with streams tomorrow. I have a bunch of coaching that I have to catch up on tomorrow. And then again, like family coming into town, got to prepare for the Sunday stream and all that stuff as well. So not sure about the stream tomorrow. I'll keep you guys updated in the Discord with that. But yeah, I appreciate everyone being here again. A little bit of a longer Thursday stream for you guys. And again, Noel fan, Steve, appreciate the gifted subs, guys. If you want to be a part of the community, Team Smell the Roses, man, I could use it. If you want to be part of the community, you're here, so you're already a part of it. But definitely would say that check out the Discord and make sure that you're following on Twitch so that you know that when I go live, even if you're not a subscriber, give me the follow so that when I go live, you can help us get closer to Twitch partner, get those numbers up for that. And then definitely make sure you're checking out the YouTube as well. You can find that youtube.com/Joe Holka. Throw me a sub over there if you haven't already. There's going to be a lot more content in the coming weeks over there as well. All right, so appreciate you guys. We'll see you on Sunday morning, and good talk. See you out there.